This week, the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom has ruled that buffer zones around abortion clinics can be set up to protect women who are trying to access their legal right to abortion from protesters. Now, clearly no one should be harassed when trying to access healthcare, but the legislation that has been put in place to allow these buffer zones could have far-reaching and unforeseen consequences on our right to protest. Now, to discuss this, we have with us Lord Farmer, a member of the House of Lords, who has challenged legislation which would install buffer zones in England and Wales. Good evening, Lord Farmer. Nice to see you. Yeah. Thank you for joining me today. This does raise all sorts of questions about the limitations of protest, and we've seen all sorts of instances with Just Stop Oil and people like this. So what is the background to this?
Well, it's interesting. This is Clause 9 has been brought onto this bill by the Labour Party in the Commons. It's a public order bill. It was the government's public order bill to deal with motorway disruptions, to deal with the difficulties that we're having with the protests today. And actually, I mean, just to give you a bit of background, that there was quite a bit of chaos during the Liz Truss days. And,
you don't say.
And actually, Stella Creasy on the Labour benches decided to attach this Clause 9 about a buffer zones around abortion clinics to the public order bill. Well, normally it would have been whipped against by the government. It's not part of this bill, but actually, with an hour to go before the voting,
yes,
it was deemed a conscience vote, and so everybody was free to vote as they wanted. And of course, the basic argument put forward was, well, of course you shouldn't harass women going to have an abortion. Of course you shouldn't be nasty towards them. And so there was an overwhelming sort of vote in favour of the buffer zones, but with very little debate. Now, we could have a debate about the role of the House of Lords, but the role of the House of Lords is to scrutinise, revise and amend the bills coming up. And a lot of the bills coming up from the Commons are pretty badly drafted.
So your view is that the Lords have a responsibility to identify when you have these kind of opportunistic, potentially, strategies where people hook something onto legislation at the last minute to prevent the opportunity for debate.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I should say in 2018, the Home Office had a review in England and Wales on buffer zones around abortion clinics. And they decided that a buffer zone was disproportionate. There just wasn't the level of harassment that was being maintained and or being argued for.
Yes.
And so it was dropped then, and now we're getting the buffer zones brought in, but there hasn't been any research or sort of data that's coming in to say the harassment is better, apart from anecdotal, well, I heard somebody shouting this, or people showing fetal photographs, etc. But there doesn't seem to be the justification for it. So we need a review.
So that's a key point. And I'd like to bring in Lois McLatchie, who is the Communications Officer at ADF International. Lois, thank you for joining us tonight. Do we have Lois? There we are. So just just relating to what Lord Farmer was just saying there is, do we really know the extent of harassment around abortion clinics and whether the buffer zones would be a legitimate way to deal with that problem?
This is the key question at the heart of this debate, is what is going on outside abortion clinics, and is it necessary to bring in legislation that would censor all activity around these zones? So the government, as Lord Farmer has adequately pointed out, have been looking into this issue for some time, and in their review in 2018, they found that instances of harassment, which are illegal, and as someone who's pro-life, I would call the police myself if I saw a pro-lifer harassing and beating a woman over the head with something to tell her not to have an abortion. That's absolutely not right, and nobody thinks that's right, and harassment's already illegal, to be very clear. That's not what we're talking about here. But what the government did find, that their most frequent activities of pro-life individuals were either quiet or silent prayer, or handing out leaflets about charitable support available to women if they would like to consider other options than abortion. And of course, that's a perfectly legal thing to do, to have an exchange of information in the street, to be handing out a leaflet about a charitable service on offer to help. Those are great and good activities that are helpful for women and helpful for society. But buffer zones go so far beyond banning harassment, which is the bad activity, that they capture also the good activity, which is the prayer and the help available.
Lord Farmer, can I ask you about that? So is the problem then that people don't have shared definitions of what constitutes harassment?
No, I wouldn't say that. I think we could generally agree what harassment is. I think personally that there's been a sort of bit of cultural authoritarianism brought in here, and political opportunism. As Lois has said, around abortion clinics, you'll find a lot of, for instance, elderly ladies, and what they're doing is praying. Well, this clause bans that. There have been already, there's a priest being warned by a policeman. He was standing there with his eyes closed, said, "You've got to stop doing this, and if you don't, you'll be arrested."
That was silent prayer.
Yes.
Okay, so would you agree, though, Lord Farmer, that everyone is accepting this idea, as Lois has pointed out, that harassment, as we understand it, should not be tolerated at all?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely right. But what you must understand also, there has been harassment the other way, and you don't really hear much about that. When a woman is going to have an abortion, who has coerced her into doing it? Has the man said, "Go and get rid of it"? Or has the mother said, "Look, you're bringing shame on the family"? There is an opportunity right at the last minute to talk to somebody who can quietly give advice, maybe say, "Look, actually, you might have financial difficulties if you have the baby. That's why you're having. Here, there's some help. This is what you can do." There's good advice and there's bad, all right? But there's also bad coercion the other side as well.
Lois, can I ask you about this? Do you accept that some people might say, well, if you are going through an abortion, through that procedure, that it can be quite a traumatic event, and actually the last thing you want is people hanging around the clinic, effectively conveying to you the message that what you are doing is morally wrong?
Well, thankfully, we've had people who speak out on this who have actually positively received offers of help outside the abortion facility. So we know that it's actually impacted many women's lives positively. They've spoken out in a campaign group called Be Here For Me, that having received that offer of help, whether that's financial support, housing, practical measures like baby supplies, they were able to make the empowered choice that they wanted to make to actually avoid abortion and become a mother on their own, with their own terms. I think it's patronizing, honestly, for the government to say to women, you are not allowed to receive this information and make your own mind up about the information that you're allowed to hear on the street. We're going to tell you what you're able to listen to or not listen to, and take those choices away from you. That's not right at all. We know from BBC polling that 1 in 5 women who have abortions do so against their will. They don't want to. So all these pro-life organisations are doing are providing alternative offers of help for women who might want them. And who's to take that away in a so-called pro-choice society?
Lord Farmer, can I ask you more broadly about protest? Why is there this need for extra legislation when it comes to this kind of example, but also the environmental activists as well? Because as you've noted, harassment is already illegal. Blocking a motorway is already illegal. Why do we need things such as the Police Crime and Sentencing Bill, which puts the onus on police to decide whether a protest should go ahead based on how noisy it is? Why do we need this stuff?
You're probably not asking the right person. I don't think we do particularly need it. In fact, as a Conservative, I think when we came into power, we said we'll be cutting down on legislation and red tape. And, it does seem to me, and this is a bit controversial, but I think politicians, when they get into power, there's a justifying your existence.
Right.
Frankly, as in this case, the law is there. You don't need the buffer zones. The law's there already. People are arrested for harassing women.
But as you've said now, what will happen is people praying silently or protesting silently, handing out leaflets.
This is the greatest incursion into civil liberties. We've lowered the barrier to the lowest ever now on this clause. This will be a precedent in future in other areas of having these buffer zones. So it's extremely important, actually, that we put a halt to this.
That's a very interesting point, Lois. And just we do have to wrap up, but I just want to put that to you. You know, surely it's possible that this kind of legislation, although it currently applies to women protesting outside abortion clinics, that can be applied elsewhere in future in ways that we may not anticipate.
That's going through Parliament right now bans even expression of opinion outside an abortion facility, the lowest ever threshold for criminalising speech. Let's put that into context. If that was applied to gender-critical thought, for example, for gender-critical feminists sharing their views on another part of the public street, if they were suddenly told that because the government disagreed with their views that they had to be censored, that would be outrageous. And this is outrageous for all. So even if you are pro-life, pro-choice, everyone should be offended by this incursion on free exchange of conversation and thought and ideas on the public square.
Well, Lois McLatchie and Lord Farmer, thank you both for joining me today. Really appreciate it.